Hey, what do you think, guys? Is this even close to a James Joyce? Now, I used to be able to pull it off. I used to have the round glasses and yeah, anyway. Hey, welcome to the Aeolus Society, my friends. We're pursuing truth, beauty, and goodness through great literature. Let me just start with a confession. All right, let's just get it out of the way. The title of this video, totally clickbait. Yeah, I look guilty. There's no such thing as Ulysses in a flash. Okay. But I'll tell you what, in this video, I am going to give you a big picture overview, and I'm gonna get you jump started into this book that has a reputation of being one of the scariest works of literature to tackle. But I will say this also, Ulysses is one of my, 5 reasons why you should read this book. So you might want to check that one out first. I've got some basic information there about James Joyce, and I'm not going to review all of that here. I'm going to do some of it, but not all of it. So, well, anyway, let's jump in. Ulysses. Mm. Ulysses picks up the action where Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man leaves off. Of course, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man being the coming of age story of Stephen Dedalus, who ends up being the Telemachus figure in Ulysses. Now, from the very beginning of its composition, and I think Joyce spent the better part of a decade working on Ulysses. From the very beginning, Joyce knew that Ulysses had to be a modern retelling of this one, of Homer's Odyssey. It had to be. The Odyssey by Homer represents the quintessential work of art of the ancients, and Joyce was aiming at something similar for 20th century readers. I said in one of the other videos, James Joyce was not trying to write a novel. He was attempting to write the novel, the novel to end all novels. Western literature had been developing for more than 2,500 years. What in the world could anybody come along and do in the 20th century that would be new and flashy and innovative, unique? Oh, I don't know. How about something that would serve as the sum total of it all? Something to bring it all together in one single solitary work. The apocalyptic summation of all things novellic, the very Platonic form of novelness. In the wasteland where the shadows lie, one novel to rule them all, one novel to find them, one novel to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. In the wasteland where the shadows lie. Yeah, I got carried away there. But I do believe Joyce is seeking to capture the whole of the human experience, the totality of the human journey and experience. How does he do that? Well, he reaches back to the first and the greatest of such literary examples, as I said, the Odyssey. Each event in the story, which is just one normal day in the life of the everyman Leopold Bloom. It's actually a very specific day, June the 16th, 1904. But each of those events is an archetypal event, an event that we all experience in some way. So Leopold Bloom is you, and he is I. He's every man. His experiences are types, these events that we all experience. Likewise, Molly Bloom, his wife, is in a sense the archetypal feminine. So in Ulysses, you have 18 episodes, all mirroring the Odyssey, or in some cases serving as a sort of parody even. Each written in a different genre to reflect the archetypal episodes of Homer's Odyssey. Look, I've got a chart I'm going to show you. But it's a mind-blowing experience. It really is. Let me bring that up. Okay, let's do a little screen share here. And here we go. Now, you should be able to see a chart that has 6 columns in it. 6 columns. So here's what I've done, friends. And oh, by the way, you're welcome. Yeah, this I think this can be very helpful to you if you're just getting started in Ulysses. In the far left-hand column, and I'm only going to go over a few of these. Remember, there are 18 episodes, okay? This is not a 6-hour-long video. This is just an overview. In the far left-hand column, I have the number of the episode, the scene, like what is actually taking place in the story, and then what time is it? Because remember, this is all just one single day, June the 16th, 1904, in the life of the Odysseus figure, Leopold Bloom. So that's far left-hand corner, pretty simple. So I have the name of the episode, and you'll see, let me just scroll gently here. Number 1, Telemachus. Number 2, the Nestor episode, which takes place as Stephen Daedalus goes to work. He's a teacher at 10 a.m. And then Proteus, Semite Strand at 11 a.m. and so forth. The next column, if it's been a while, maybe since you've read the Odyssey, this next column is sort of a reminder, like what was that scene or what was that character about in Homer's story? So I provided there for you. If you don't remember who Telemachus was, he was Odysseus's son. And at the beginning of the story, there are all these suitors there, remember in the palace who want to marry Penelope because Odysseus has been gone for 20 years. Telemachus has to kind of step up to the plate. He goes and visits Nestor and Menelaus and so forth. So what I'm doing in that second column is I'm giving you, okay, this is the Homeric story or theme from which Joyce is sometimes launching, sometimes very much so, other times a little bit more loosely based on that particular theme. So moving on to the third column. So then, okay, if that's the aspect of the Odyssey that Joyce is dealing with, then what actually happens in the story? That's the third column, the Joycean theme. Stephen Daedalus is the Telemachus figure. He leaves the apartment. Buck Mulligan is one of his roommates. He kind of, I guess he's sort of a suitor figure. He's sort of an usurper. And Stephen really struggles with him and his attitude. Stephen is also struggling with the fact that his mother had just passed away, and he feels very guilty about it because his mother asked him to pray for her on her deathbed, and he would not do it. And so you've got a little bit of that, Penelope Telemachus relationship. Here you have Stephen and his mother. It's different, but in some ways there are some connections. So third column, this is what Joyce is doing in the story Ulysses. Now, in the fourth column, what I've done, which is what I think Joyce wants us to do, is to pull out the universal from the particular. So what is the big picture theme? What is the, timeless idea that Joyce saw in Homer's story that he is now giving a 20th century twist to? That's the universal theme. So, young men have to grow up. Young men have to deal with the death of their parents. Young men have to, young boys have to become men, and so forth. That's the universal theme. And you'll see all the way throughout. All 8, this is about a 13-page document. By the way, I'm going to tell you at the end of this video that if you'd like to have this chart, if you email me, bruce@aeolus.com, I'd be glad to send it to you. But this is a 13-page document. I'm only going to be going over a few of these. Now, Joyce was not interested in the biblical themes. Not really. I mean, there's a gazillion biblical references in this story. But James Joyce was raised in the Roman Catholic Church, very strict, dedicated Roman Catholic Church. He was educated by the Jesuits, for Pete's sake. But when Joyce got out on his own and went with Nora Barnacle and they went traveling all over Europe, Joyce became an atheist. So the fifth column is something I did. So if this is truly a bona fide universal theme, then where do we see it in God's word? Where is it in the Bible? What does it look like? What does the Bible have to say about boys becoming men? What does the Bible have to say about relationships between, mothers and sons and so forth? And that's just something that I did from a Christian worldview perspective. The final column, Joyce published a separate work where he gave each episode, this is going to sound bizarre, an organ of the body, a particular art or discipline, a symbol, and then a technique or genre. And every single one of them doesn't have all four of those, but most of them do. So you'll see for the first episode, there's no organ, but theology is the discipline that is stressed. The symbol is the symbol of an heir, so you've got parent-son relationship there. And then what genre is it? It's a simple narrative. It's nothing fancy. The opening episode, the Telemachus episode, is very simple, very easy to read. You'll get through that one, all right, without getting bogged down. Now, what I want to do is just quickly go through a few of these, let you see kind of what they look like. I'm going to skip up to number 5. So see, you've got the Proteus. Number 4, you got Calypso. Remember, at the beginning of the Odyssey, Odysseus is stranded on the island of Ogygia with Calypso, whose name means to hide. She's hiding him. Hermes comes, gets him released. Okay, that's just a reminder of the ancient Greek story. But I'm going to skip all the way up to number 5. You remember the Lotus Eaters. So this is one of the many sort of adventures that Odysseus goes through. Was, his men, they landed in this area. Some scholars think, if you're going to put geographic location to these things, it might have been Northern Africa, maybe around where Egypt is. But anyway, the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus's men were eating this lotus plant, and it was like a drug. It drugged them, and it just made them feel relaxed. The problem was it made them forget home. They didn't want to go home. So Odysseus had to drag the men back to the ship. It was an obstacle. It was an impediment. It wasn't a good thing. It drugged them. So what does Joyce do with that? Well, Joyce, in this particular episode, Bloom is walking around Dublin. By the way, all this happens in Dublin, Ireland. And he's in a restful state, almost like he's been drugged. He goes into a church and he compares the elements, that is the body and the blood, the Eucharist, the bread and the wine, to this lotus plant, because from his worldview perspective, it was like a drug. It had a drug-like effect on its worshipers. It's almost like Marx's, that quote that's attributed to Marx, at least, religion is the opiate of the people. It's not real. It's something that keep the masses kind of drugged and not really wanting to seek truth. So the whole episode is about related to issues that have to do with being drugged or feeling relaxed, whatever the case may be. Universals, I put some experiences over there, like, sometimes we drug ourselves with television or drugs or alcohol or whatever the case may be. I have biblical references listed and so forth. You'll see that for the organ, for this particular one, Joyce chose genitals. For the art or discipline, botany, which makes sense. This is about a plant or chemistry. The Eucharist is the symbol here. And a major theme is narcissism. I want to go to number 6 for the next one. In the course of his day, Leopold Bloom goes to a funeral. Again, keep in mind, friends, what Leopold Bloom does on June the 16th, 1904, there's nothing unusual about it. It's all ordinary. It's all, things that people do every day. He goes to a funeral. Patty Dignam was a friend of his who had passed away. What does death have to do with the Odyssey? Well, that brings back the fact that Odysseus had to visit the underworld. And he had to learn from the prophet Tiresias the way to get home. So he experiences a kind of death, and then he comes back out of it. So a sort of death and resurrection. What does Joyce do with that? Well, Bloom is attending a funeral. That's how he's connecting the theme of death with the Hades episode. There's a graveyard scene and so forth. Bloom ends up thinking about the fact that his own father committed suicide. So the whole episode is shrouded, sorry about that, kind of on purpose though, in morbid language of death and dying. Universals. How should we think about death? What does death mean for us? What does the Bible have to say about that? I put some references. Again, organ, heart, religion, caretaker, incubism. Okay, so again, just giving you a few examples. I'm just going to do a couple more. I'm going to skip all the way up. Number 7 is the Aeolus. Remember the bag of winds? Lestrygonians were the cannibals. So that whole episode is about consumption, how we consume each other, sometimes with our actions. Very fascinating stuff. Skill and Charybdis, caught between a rock and a hard place. He really works that theme out. I'm going to skip all the way up. Sirens. Oh my goodness. There's so many fascinating things with the sirens there and the role of women in that one. I'm going to go all the way up to number 12, the Cyclops. You remember the Cyclops? You know, Odysseus and his men land on this island. They end up roaming around. They end up in a cave. Polyphemus ends up eating several of Odysseus's men, and Odysseus has to come up with a crafty way to blind the Cyclops, and he gets them drunk, and they sneak out on the underbelly of the sheep. You know, that's the Cyclops story. So I'm reminding you of that in the second column. But what does Joyce do with that? You know, what do you do with this? What do you do with a one-eyed monster? Well, first of all, the pronoun I and its homophone I appear frequently throughout the chapter, over and over and over. And another thing that Joyce is doing is, in this episode, is he has an individual who has what you might call a monocular point of view. Monocular, just a fancy word that means one-eyed. So you know how we get in our echo chambers. This is politics in America right now, isn't it? We're all in our little echo chambers. We all only see with one eye. We see what we want to see, and so forth. That's what Joyce does with it. Once again, I pull out universal themes. How do we do that? What does it look like? What does the Bible have to say about viewing all of reality in that way? So you're starting to hopefully pick up. I just want to do 2 more. Nausicaa, that's a fascinating one. I think the most fascinating one, however, of all by far is episode number 14, Oxen of the Sun. Now, Oxen of the Sun, remember how Odysseus had warned his men, do not kill the oxen of the sun, the cattle of the god Helios. If you do, then you're all going to die. That is the god of fertility. What is Joyce going to do with a fertility concept? Leopold Bloom goes to a maternity hospital at 10 p.m. See, we're already towards the end of the, it's nighttime now. And there's a friend of his, a lady who is giving birth to a child. So Bloom stops by the hospital to see how she's doing, a friendly visit. So I remind you in the second column what the story in the Odyssey is. Third column, what happens here in Ulysses in the 14th episode that has to do with maternity or birth or pregnancy. And I got to tell you guys, this is the episode, I think, where my mind started to explode reading Ulysses. Here's what he does. In this episode, Joyce writes the entire chapter in 31 different genres. Why 31? Well, 30 or 31 days in a month, 9 months, the gestation or period of pregnancy. So what Joyce is doing is picking one genre for every day of the month. He also divides the chapter into 3 sections. The first section representing the first trimester of pregnancy, then the second, then the third trimester. But the 31 genres, here's what's fascinating, that he chooses move chronologically from old Latin forms that go all the way back to the 1st century He moves forward to Chaucerian English, medieval English, Shakespearean English, and he mimics authors of different time periods. He shifts the genre in which he's writing, moving along chronologically. I say a page or two or three of each of these genres. And it's sort of like as the genres are moving along through time, the baby is developing in the womb. The baby is moving through the gestation period, the 3 trimesters, and the days of the month. It's truly an absolutely mind-blowing concept, and he pulls it off. I've reread that chapter many times. Oxen of the Sun, again, I have all the columns laid out there. And then finally, the last episode is, of course, the Penelope episode. This is the end of the story where Odysseus, you know the story, he finally does make it home to his wife. He kills the suitors. He gets back together with his wife, and he and Telemachus are reunited. It's a happy ending. It's a little violent, but it's a happy ending. So Joyce called the last episode Penelope. The entire episode is pretty long, is a monologue entirely by Molly Bloom, the Penelope figure. And watch this, it consists of only 8 sentences. They are enormously long sentences with little or no punctuation. So a sentence that goes on for page after page after page after page. It's the effect that Joyce is trying to get here is that interior monologue, or as some folks call it, that stream of consciousness. Because it would be like that. Our the thoughts that we have running through our minds that are hidden to everyone else in the world, there's no punctuation there. There's no, capitalized letter and an end mark too. There's no Shirley grammar there. Right? So Joyce is trying to mimic that interior monologue, and that rounds out the entire day, 18 episodes, and there you have it. So I've just gone over, obviously, a few examples so that you can kind of get, the basic idea of what Joyce is doing. So I do want to mention one more thing really quickly. Reading Ulysses is a lot like Dante, moving through hell and purgatory. He had to have a guide, Virgil, you're going to need a guide. And if you're just getting started, I've got a bookshelf full over here, but if I had to only recommend 2, I would recommend, first of all, the new Bloomsday book by Harry Blamires. Look, it's readable. He does a 1-chapter overview of each of the episodes, gets right to the point, helps you to understand some of those obscure references that otherwise you may not get. And I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed. This is a very recent publication. Patrick Hastings, author, lives down in Maryland. I've actually corresponded with him a bit. This just came out in the past year. It's called The Guide to James Joyce's Ulysses. He does the same thing that Blamires does. He just has a lot of things to say that Blamires didn't. If you want to kind of go from there, the late Frank Delaney, is also an Irish writer, did a podcast called Rejoice. And you're not going to believe this. He actually walks through Ulysses line by line. Yeah, it's hundreds and hundreds of hours long. And he passed away, unfortunately, before he finished it, but he did a very significant chunk of the book. Okay, there you have it, guys. Any questions or comments? I do have a lot of other resources I'd be glad to share with you. I will tell you this, most versions of Ulysses do not, I repeat, do not have the episodes listed, either in a table of contents or in the text anywhere. No, you got to figure that out. The whole thing is like a fun puzzle or riddle. If you shoot me an email, I can give you those page numbers, and it'll save you a lot of time. It'd be very helpful to you. Anyway, good luck reading with Ulysses. Email me if you have any questions or comments. Bruce at AlyoshaSociety.com.